Bruce Lee versus Bolo Young is the fight that everyone really wanted to see in Enter the Dragon, and right as it almost happened, well, it didn't. But there's a few stories floating around the internet saying that maybe Bruce Lee and Bolo got into a few scraps behind the scenes, and maybe those real fights off camera had something to do with why we didn't see a Bolo versus Bruce Lee fight in Enter the Dragon. So let's talk about what really happened when Bolo Young challenged Bruce Lee.
You are next.
Well, according to one person, Bruce Lee and Bolo Young were actually supposed to have a big fight in Enter the Dragon. Everything was all planned out. The choreography for the fight, the shot list for the camera crew, I mean everything. The reason why it didn't happen was all because of what happened behind the scenes around Bolo Young challenging Bruce Lee. Now, all of this is coming from our good friend Beardy.
Hey everybody, it's Birdie here. What's going on, guys?
And if you didn't know about the Beardy Bruce Lee Central YouTube channel, well, he's the self-proclaimed biggest Bruce Lee expert on YouTube, and he tells all of these wild stories about Bruce Lee from his sources that he always has to keep a secret. So lately, Beardy's been posting all of these videos about Bolo Young and Bruce Lee. And people have been leaving me comments and sending me emails and hitting me in the DMs, asking me if I'll take a look at Beardy's latest video because he talks about how Bolo beat up Bruce Lee while they were filming Enter the Dragon.
So, guys, it's here. It's proof. Bolo Young defeated Bruce Lee.
So I decided that I'd take a look at everything that Beardy's saying about these challenges that went on behind the scenes between Bruce Lee and Bolo Young. Now, like I was saying, according to Beardy, Bruce Lee and Bolo Young were supposed to have a really big fight together in Enter the Dragon, but something happened that caused the entire production crew to scrap the fight and completely change the script because Bolo was afraid to do the fight with Bruce Lee. So how all of this happens, well, that's an even bigger story that goes all the way back to 1971, back when Bruce Lee and Youngza first met. See, it starts before the man that we call Bolo Young would even be called by his character's name in Enter the Dragon. Now, if you want, look, you guys can go watch and listen to at least 8 videos on Beardy's channel all about this stuff, because, I mean, it doesn't matter to me if you want to support Beardy or not, but I'm going to tell you the story based on what he said in those videos anyway. So anyway, like I was saying, in 1971, Bruce Lee and Youngza were 2 struggling actors in Hong Kong. Bruce had just come off The Big Boss, which shattered the box office. Youngza, or you know what, how about I just call him Bolo? We know him as Bolo, so I'm going to call him Bolo, all right? So Bolo had done some small parts with Shaw's Brothers Studios, and he had the title of Mr. Hong Kong because he won all of these bodybuilding competitions. So these guys are struggling actors doing a bunch of commercials together, and they're hanging out at this nightclub. And to make a long story short, they get approached by this guy in the nightclub, and I think it was Some Dumb Goy. Y'all heard about him in another video.
There is an old sage called Some Dumb Goy.
So Some Dumb Goy returns again, and he's like, which one of y'all would win in a fight? And Bruce Lee says, well, it wouldn't be a fair fight because I'm a martial artist, he's a bodybuilder. Well, at this point, Bolo's pissed off because, well, according to Beardy, Bolo is actually a specialist in Northern-style Eagle Claw Kung Fu. So Bolo's like, hey, yo, dog, I'm a martial artist first, and then I'm a bodybuilder. So how about we step outside, and I'm going to show you what's up. So they step outside to fight. Bolo puts Bruce Lee in a headlock because Eagle Claw Kung Fu makes your grip strong, so, you know, that means Bolo would be good at putting people in headlocks.
And you know, Eagle Claw is all about gripping. That's why he put him in the headlock.
You know, with his arms, because, you know, if you have a strong grip, then you have to have strong arms, right? Right? Well, Bruce Lee knees Bolo in the ribs, and then he elbows Bolo in the jaw, which gave Bolo a concussion because Bolo spent so much time working on his grip strength to put people in headlocks that he didn't train his neck at all. So it's really easy to knock him out. But anyway, well, about 1.5 years later, Bruce Lee calls up his good friend Bolo, who he beat up outside of a nightclub in 1971, because he wants to know if he'll play in this movie, Enter the Dragon. So while they're filming the movie, Bruce Lee and Bolo have a lot of practice sessions to rehearse for their big fight scene. So about halfway into production, Bolo asked Bruce Lee if they could have a sparring match to feel each other out, you know? So Bolo wanted to test Bruce Lee's strength. So he puts Bruce Lee in a bear hug and begins to squeeze. And I guess Bolo learned his lesson a few years before about putting Bruce Lee in a headlock, you know, using that grip strength from all those years of training Northern Eagle Claw. Well, Bruce got out of the bear hug and he took a step back and hit Bolo in the chest. Bolo waved his hand to say that it was over, and that was that. And I actually did talk about this fight in another video last year where I'll go into more detail. Well, later on, as they really are getting ready to start rehearsing for their fight scene, Bolo asked Bruce if they can have a real full contact sparring match, because the fight outside that nightclub or Bruce knocking the wind out of Bolo, that wasn't enough already. That wasn't real sparring, I guess. So this time Bruce blitzed Bolo. Bolo could only attempt to block, and he couldn't even get off a single punch on Bruce Lee. And I guess Bolo just conceded the match because, well, he didn't want to get another concussion or get the wind knocked out of him by one of Bruce Lee's Tekken finishing moves or something. Well, they finally get around to Bruce Lee and Bolo finally rehearsing their fight scene together. And at some point, Bruce Lee accidentally punches Bolo for real. Bolo's infuriated, but he doesn't say anything until they wrap shooting for the day. After everyone clears out, Bolo challenges Bruce Lee to a fight. According to Beardy's source who witnessed the fight, Bolo pinned Bruce Lee with some kind of a lock. Bruce manages to get out of it, and he upkicks Bolo and knocks the wind out of him in the process. Now here's something funny, because Beardy tells that same story again 6 months later, but the second time he tells the story, he says that there was no winner or loser, but that Bruce Lee made Bolo tap out.
There was no winner or loser because they weren't going at it like for real. And basically what happened here is that Bolo Young had to concede to Bruce Lee. And that's what ended the fight. Bruce Lee tapping out Bolo Young.
But okay, after that, Bruce Lee and Bolo once again had another sparring match. And you think Bolo would have learned his lesson by now, but nope. So this time they are actually getting ready to shoot this fight with Bolo and Bruce Lee that's supposed to be in Enter the Dragon. Bolo said that he wanted to test Bruce Lee, and as they are sparring, well, Bolo starts getting frustrated, so he ups the intensity, and Bruce Lee actually knocks Bolo out. They had to halt production for 2 days, even though Bolo wasn't a major character, but I mean, whatever, just go with it at this point. Well, Bolo threatened to quit the movie. The writers and producers had to scrap the entire scene because Bolo refused to do the fight with Bruce after Bruce knocked him out. So after Bolo was afraid to do the fight scene with Bruce Lee after being accidentally hit and then beat up in several sparring matches, well, everyone agreed that John Saxon's character should be the one who fights Bolo. Well, during rehearsals for that fight scene, John Saxon one day asked Bruce to spar with him, and Bruce goes and takes John Saxon to get Bolo, and then he proceeds to fight John Saxon and Bolo Young at the same time.
And Bruce Lee got John Saxon with a liver shot, and John Saxon went down immediately in pain. And then he grabbed Bolo from the side and he grappled him. He grappled his arm. He got him with an arm bar, as you can see here in this photo, and Bolo Young tapped out.
And then after all of this, well, one day on the set, I guess Bolo's finally tired of getting his ass kicked by Bruce Lee. He walks up behind Bruce Lee, smashes him with a headbutt, lifts him up in the air, and then slams Bruce Lee on the ground. Bruce gets up, shakes Bolo's hand, and goes right back to work. And after going through all of these videos, I'm looking at Beardy's comment section that's filled with the Bruce Lee fanboys, and I'm in complete disbelief.
Because we understood that this was clearly lying.
But anyway, you guys have heard what Beardy's been saying about Bolo and Bruce Lee.
Well, allow me to retort.
So now I'm going to hit you guys with some facts about their relationship. So Bruce Lee and Bolo Young were really good friends going back to a Winston Cigarettes commercial that featured the two of them. Bruce invited Bolo out to his house on several occasions to talk training, martial arts, and the movie business. There was never going to be a fight scene between Bruce Lee and Bolo. Bolo actually talked about this in some interviews. He said that he was disappointed about not getting to fight Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon, and that Bruce promised him that they would fight each other in the game of death. Bolo dabbled in some kung fu growing up, and I doubt that he was any kind of an expert in Northern Eagle Claw, like Beardy said, because Bolo's only ever talked about studying Yang-style Tai Chi, and as he got older, his characters are all Tai Chi masters in the movies. Bruce was working closely with Bolo on the set of Enter the Dragon because Bruce was planning to add Bolo to his crew. Have you guys ever heard of the Jackie Chan stunt team? Maybe you have or haven't. I don't know. If you're into wushu and following like the kung fu stunt guys, you probably are familiar with them. Well, Bruce may have actually inspired Jackie Chan to create his stunt team. You see, Bruce also had a crew of guys who were in all of his movies if you look close enough. Just as a side note, something you should pay attention to if you actually watch Beardy's videos is that Beardy's always making up some crazy story where Bruce Lee teaches some guy a lesson on set. And those guys are almost always one of the guys in Bruce Lee's crew. That's how you can pretty much tell that Beardy's making all of these stories up. When Bruce Lee was actually being challenged around Hong Kong by other actors who were trying to make a name, these guys in his crew were asking Bruce if they could actually fight some of those people in Bruce Lee's place. So back to what I was saying, Bruce was planning to take Bolo under his wing and have him be part of his team. Bruce was planning to bring all of these guys with him to Hollywood, which could have completely transformed the Hollywood action scene decades before, basically everyone getting into stunts started to have some kind of martial arts training. And I mean, he would have changed everything if he hadn't died in 1973. So all of these fights between Bruce Lee and Bolo, look, there's no way that would have happened in the real world. In Beardy's imaginary world where Bruceploitation movies all happen to the real Bruce Lee, look, I guess anything goes, including Bolo Yeung sneaking up on the lead actor in a Hollywood production who had a major back injury at the time and slamming him on his back in front of everyone and not getting completely removed from the project. Like that, his career should have been finished for that. But look, all of these stories that Beardy has are completely made up. He's looking at photos from behind the scenes, and in some cases, he's looking at promotional pictures that were basically a 1970s version of clickbait that was meant to sell audiences on a potential fight between Bruce Lee's character and Bolo Yeung because Bolo looks cool. But beyond that, look, there's not an ounce of truth to anything Beardy's saying in these videos. And the funny thing is that, well, Bolo Yeung really did challenge Bruce Lee. And do you know what happened? When Bolo challenged Bruce Lee, he lost. Well, actually, I think it was the other way around. Bruce Lee challenged Bolo Yeung. See, Bruce Lee's secret to his strength was isometric training. And I've talked about this in at least 2 videos, including the most recent one I did, where Beardy claimed that he trained like Bruce Lee for an entire year. I actually showed Bruce Lee's isometric strength training routine in that video. So check it out when you have a chance. But if you don't know anything about isometrics, I'll just say that it made Bruce's connective tissues extremely strong, and he was able to stabilize against incoming forces. And isometrics, they are amazing for increasing power. So Bruce Lee challenged Bolo to an arm wrestling match, and this is according to Michael Chan, or Chen Wai Min. Michael Chan was a policeman, a triad member, a kickboxer, and an actor, and he actually played the hero in the movie Chinese Hercules that Bolo Yeung is in. So at some point, Michael Chan spent a lot of time with Bolo Yeung. And you know what? I just think it's funny how Beardy has these stories from his sources in Hong Kong that he always has to keep a secret. Whereas look, I just told you guys what really happened when Bruce Lee challenged Bolo Yeung, and I said that Michael Chan or Chen Wai Min told the story. And I mean, I wish Beardy and the Bruce Lee Real Fight Channel kid would actually do some real research on Bruce Lee and then present what they find, because embellishing stories about Bruce Lee or spreading these fake myths, it does nothing but harm Bruce Lee's legacy. I mean, Bruce Lee did have some real challenges when he was on the set of Enter the Dragon. And I mean, all it takes is a little digging to uncover some of these stories. Like, instead of saying there was some guy who was a photographer on the set of Enter the Dragon 50 years ago who emailed me completely out of the blue, I can just say, hey, did you guys know Bruce Lee had a fight in Enter the Dragon that no one is talking about? And this is true, he did. I found an article just the other day on Henry Wong, and Henry Wong was a cameraman on Enter the Dragon. He filmed something like 20 canisters of behind the scene footage. He filmed the fight when Bruce Lee kicked the kid in the mouth and knocked out his teeth, but he also had another one that I've never heard anyone talk about, and I couldn't believe it when I heard it. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers threw away all of his footage, so we won't see it. But look, y'all, this whole thing for this particular video started because people were questioning me about Beardy's video that said Bruce Lee lost a fight to Bolo Young. That story is completely made up, but I have a question for you. Why does it matter if Bruce Lee loses a fight? I have some stories where Bruce Lee struggled with people sparring, and they're not from some student who heard from another person, but from the actual person who sparred with Bruce. Look, Bruce Lee was human, but he really was unbelievable. And I know the Bruce Lee haters won't accept that I said that, but when I read stuff from Bruce Lee's students, it's the same way I describe training with my Sifu, Sam Chin, where you're like at the point where you're confused, like, yo, man, how did he just do that? Now, if you've ever been in that situation training with somebody, you'll understand what I'm saying. And if you haven't, well, I mean, look, you just got to get out there and train until you meet somebody or one of these people who's on that level where it's like they're a mutant or something when it comes to this stuff. But anyway, if you want to hear more about how freakishly good Bruce Lee was at taking people completely apart, you should really check out this video about what really happened when people were challenging Bruce Lee on the set of Enter the Dragon. And none of these stories involve crazy sparring matches with Bolo Young, but Bolo did witness some of those challenges. Or if you want something different, you can check out this video on what really happened when Steven Seagal fought Bruce Lee. Or did he? You'll have to watch the entire video to find out the truth. But most importantly, look, y'all, I don't share these stories about Bruce Lee to fanboy out over him. I share them as motivation for you guys to keep training, to remember to breathe, and so that you'll come back to hear a new story on the next video.